Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Feeling Seen podcast, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. My co-host today is one of those Renaissance women, a woman in the modern age of media, which means she does it all, she's done it all, she's probably teaching herself to do more as we currently speak. You can hear her currently on the podcast with Tre'vell Anderson, friend of the show, friend of this network, member of this network. We see each other, which is I have been thoroughly enjoying as a wonderful deep dive into a conversation from two people who are of their community that they are talking about. And as Shar says this is not 101 dialogue. This is the second semester of your education in vernacular of trans Black presence in the world. You can find her bylines in publications like BET and Variety. Shar, what do the people need to know about you more before we get going? It's kind of one of those things where like I could just keep saying everything, but I feel like you would best speak to your own media image and career up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you covered a lot, but I mean, you know, I've been a journalist for a decade now. I've been in LA for about a decade. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm like you mentioned, I'm a Renaissance woman. Yeah. And I'm in and of the industry and in and of the city, and I'm just monkey barring from one thing to the next. You know what it's like.
Yep. When in your media career did you realize it was monkey barring and not maybe necessarily like a linear ladder climbing thing that perhaps at one time you thought that it might be, and then you were like, oh, no, not in this 21st century media environment?
I want to say when I became a permalancer in January of 2019 is when I first realized it, but it took
That'll be a lesson right quick there.
Yes, but you know what? It took me years to get comfortable with it. I want to say up until this past like winter season, like winter 2022, 2023, is when I got comfortable with knowing that throughout the ebbs and the flows, I will be okay. Like you don't have to panic every winter when the lights go dark because you've been carried and you've been okay and the work speaks for itself. Yeah. And so, but the uncertainty drives me nuts. I am an earth sign through and through. I am a Capricorn. I like stability. I like a degree of predictability. And so that's something that like I said, I just recently got comfortable with, but learning to embrace the unpredictability of it has been definitely a journey.
Tell me a bit about We See Each Other and where with that podcast with Tre'vell, where do you feel like that fits? Like the first episode of that, I believe it's called The Kitchen Table. Yeah. And it's sort of you guys like setting expectations for what's going to come in the podcast. And I cited it in the intro, but where you say like, this is not like trans 101. This is the second semester. It's 2023. We are past that. So I wanted to talk to you about being sort of in the additional semesters of your career. Now with, you know, all this time and experience behind you and getting, you know, into this year, 2023 and having a podcast like We See Each Other, where do you find yourself in terms of like, I am interested in explaining further my existence to people for the purposes of education? Or is it sort of like, I'm a bit fucking over that, and if you don't have the vernacular already, I'm not really interested in giving it to you? Like, as a communicator, where do you find yourself in your relationship with language in that way?
That's an interesting question, especially given that it's Pride Month and we're recording this.
Yes.
Because my relationship with my identity is one that's very strong. I've always been headstrong. I know exactly who I am, and I've been able to meet the moment. However, I am someone who says that my transness is the least interesting aspect about me. So when Tre'vell and I, you know, when Tre'vell approached me to do this, of course I was going to. I mean, I love Tre'vell. I've known them for years. We've worked together on other projects, and their book is something that I believe in. Their book is something is a piece of work that's necessary right now. I've read it, of course, because I did the show. I've interviewed them about the book. And so it was a little interesting for me because I'm someone who navigates my own personal politic by having my Blackness, my womanhood, and my transness show up at the same time. But the ways in which I express that is I say I'm a Black woman who is trans. Gotcha. And I say that because I think that it falls on the ear differently. And then that dictates how people then deal with me. The pigeonholing that sometimes comes with being visible is a double-edged sword, because I am an entertainment journalist through and through. Meaning you do not, I've been in so many meetings where it's like, hello, I can talk to Jennifer Lopez and Brad Pitt and Mary J. Blige. You do not have to only call me when Billy Porter and Michaela J. Rodriguez and Angelica Ross do, or Hunter Schafer does something.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's been a very interesting, and there's people that don't agree with me. And I think that's why Tre'vell picked me to be, I mean, I do good work, but my politics are my individual politics. And there is this, there's this frame of thought with community that we all must be on the same page. Although people will tell you that, and none of us are on the same page, especially when it comes to personal politics and identity politics. Yeah. And so that's just something about me. I do not desire, nor have I ever desired to walk people through my transition, because there are things on the books. If you truly want to know, there are, we carry these things in our purses, in our pockets, called phones, and anything else we want to know answers to, we seek that information. And I always say that there are podcasts. If you don't like podcasts, there are documentaries. If you don't like documentaries, there are films, there's books. There's so many different avenues for the story to be told. And so it's like, when people focus on my transness, it strips away some of my humanity, because that's all you ever want to talk about. And so that's why I say it's the least interesting thing about me, because it is. I have no real, I'd say, harrowing tale that people look to. People love trans trauma, and I'm Black on top of that. People love a struggle story. And the truth of the matter is, I don't necessarily have that. I mean, I have my struggles, but I'm college educated. I come from a 2-parent household. My parents are still in my life. They never kicked me out. And so the list goes on. And so I disappoint people when I share my story, because it's not, they don't have the language, or they're not upfront about it, but it's not what they're looking for, if I'm being honest.
In a much less, in a way with much less gravity and significance than that, I find that to be like, in media, there is that sort of branding element that really asks you to be like, to subscribe to things that media people find alluring. And the thing that I always struggled with, like when I was in journalism more formally, was this like cultural cachet, particularly in the way online forums like writers and writing is discussed, like this emphasis on like anxiety and imposter syndrome, and this like, oh, I wrote a thing, and bashfully sort of putting it, and like I was like, I would so often, like, I would talk to friends and be like, am I allowed to do this job if I don't hate myself? Like, am I a legit writer if I don't like think everything I write is bad, or that this career is painful and that the process of it sucks? Like, there's this like, the way that like, in that notion of like language mattering, like the repetition of language around how we reinforce our character and what we expect of a person in our community or category, like whether or not you do so intentionally, it's like, fuck, that repetition really takes hold, guys. And suddenly we're this like monolith of anxiety and introversion and hating our jobs and lives. It's like, no, I'm good.
I totally agree. And it inadvertently calls more of that energy, I believe, into your life. And it creates problems that weren't always there. And that's how, like, you speaking to that reminds me of how this year for me has been all about reclaiming my joy. And so with that, it's been rejecting. I'm not taking away from the realities of the topsy-turviness of this current socio-political climate, because it's ugly out here, it's frustrating, and it's maddening. But I also recognize that as an individual, there's only so much I can do. And I cannot lay what's left of me continuously down on the line to just be ate up and discarded of, because that's what will happen. I've seen that happen so many times before. And I think that we all individually have a calling as far as how we approach certain things and how our activism and how our advocacy shows up. And I think that, like I said, this year has been all about reclaiming joy for me. And so for me personally, it's been about rejecting certain narratives if they have not been specifically my lived experience. That is not my story. And I want to make the most of this life. And so I've taken a different approach this year, because I noticed that you can get lost in the cycle of, if everyone around you, like you said, is saying, oh, imposter syndrome, or approaching their work instead of being like, this is awesome reporting that I did. And you should read this, with saying like, I did a thing. I guess I wrote a thing. I talked to Oprah today, and Challenge her. Like, no, I talked to Oprah damn Winfrey today, and this is why you should read it, because I'm damn good at what I do, and I'm not making apologies for that. And so, yeah, I definitely think that there's certain powers that be that benefit off of the groupthink of it all, and you are a troublemaker if you rebel against it.
This, I think, segues actually perfectly into film choice and character choice, because I think this mentality, this courage of conviction and standing in oneself, you have brought Two Can Play That Game from 2001, starring Vivica A. Fox as Shantae Smith.
Yes.
And I feel like that is the thing that Shantae Smith would have told us in one of her asides. That was a cut aside to the camera from Shantae Smith in Two Can Play That Game.
I'm Shantae Smith, Senior Advertising Executive at Parker & Long. And if you haven't noticed, I'm a sister. An educated, strong sister who remembers where she came from and knows where she's going. But let me ask you a question. Why can't men act right? Don't they know that if they acted right, women would gladly give them all the love and respect that they needed? But because they show their asses, we got to check them.
Yeah, that movie, and it took for me to, it always meant something to me, but it took for me to really interrogate the gravity of it, right? Because when you talk about like media representation, a lot of people bring these prestige films to the table. And I first, it was Gone with the Wind or The Color Purple. And I'm like, no, for me, if I'm being honest, I distinctly remember that film, like there were Disney films, I believe, and there were little representations in media where I was able to take things from. But as far as a defining moment for me was Two Can Play That Game. I was in 7th grade. I remember being in middle school. For me, our middle school was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I remember in 6th grade still being a crier. Like, I'm still a crier as an adult, but I remember crying so much. Like, anybody could say or do anything to me in 6th grade, and I would cry about it. And I remember in 7th grade, there was just so much turn in my life. That was the beginning of something very interesting with my adolescence. Was 7th grade. I remember that. And that is when this film, around the time that this film came out. And I remember after watching it, I went to the mirror. I've shared this story before. I went to the mirror and I remember staring at myself and kind of, tugging at my face and really examining myself. And this film, Two Can Play That Game, starring Gabrielle Union and Vivica Fox and Morris Chestnut and Anthony Anderson and Monique and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
It was the first time that I really interrogated gender for myself.
Yeah. What a movie of gender. This movie is filled with gender.
Right. Mind you, I grew up with examples of binary gender all around me. Men watching football, women in the kitchen. Like, I grew up with that. But this film was the first time that I was like, when I am 25, I remember thinking this, what am I going to look like?
Yeah.
What am I going, because I'd already started kind of like experimenting, wearing clear mascara. I had to sneak, putting a clear top coat on my hands and feet and doing little things that rebelled against the gender I was assigned at birth, because those things made me feel more comfortable with myself, those presentations, but I was doing them very secretively. But I still remember that was the first time I kind of interrogated, like, at 25, do I want to have the goatee and the briefcase?
Yeah.
Or do I want to be with my power suit going to go see my man in my drop top convertible? Because it's still a very binary world. And so it was something about, and then even just having a strong connection to the women in my life, my mother, my aunts, my cousins. I'm the eldest of 3. I have 2 little sisters. And so just relating more, like inextricably relating more to femininity and what I viewed as womanhood at the time, versus boyhood and manhood. That film shook me.
Well, this is, God, what a petri dish of a movie to see the differences between like boyhood and manhood in a like late 90s, early 2000s, like adult, like late 20-somethings context. And then to see like with like this movie is like gender distilled for like our ideas of like how attractive like 20-somethings, young adults, like rising adults live in cosmopolitan areas. Like, this is like, shit, I guess if I'm picking one or the other, I'm getting a pretty stark contrast in what those options are.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Like, it shook me. Out of all of the things that I had seen and out of all of the experiences I had had up until that point, this film, this little itty bitty, play on gender wars, shook me to my core.
We never know where it's going to come from.
We never know.
Well, this really interests me specifically in terms of like the very first episode of the show. We had the writer Emily St. James on, and she chose Dani in Midsommar for her character.
Okay.
And she said that like she watched that movie very much around her public coming out. And I think she had just started was experiencing the world regularly as a woman, presenting as a woman. So it was it was all new. And she said the thing that really resonated with her most, like the kind of moment, the moment of connection that was strongest was when you have that breakdown with Dani where Florence Pugh is surrounded by the Harga women, and it's the grief breathing and they're screaming together and they're like this notion that like and like dancing around the maypole. Yeah. And suddenly it snaps into place that like she's on these drugs, but suddenly she can understand the Harga women around her with no knowledge of the language, no awareness of but it just clicks in for her. And she said watching Florence Pugh suddenly understand the world around her as these women were speaking to her was for her akin to the experience of finally being able to live as a woman and be like, wow, oh, I understand this language. Like I am around all of you as you. And we women are experiencing this world together. And this language makes sense to me. Like, I feel like I've been on the outside hearing sort of gibberish the entire time. But now, like, it's been decoded for me and it's clicked into place. And I've hung on to that as one of my absolute favorite moments from this entire podcast I've been so lucky to be able to do of like, wow, that moment of like, holy shit, like the decoder kicked in.
Right.
And suddenly I could hear the language that belonged to me only because it was so intrinsic to me. That's why I understood it. Like I didn't need to be taught it. I understood it.
Yeah. It's like a big thump upside the head. Like it was the first time I felt that, the gods have grabbed me by my shoulders and kind of shook me. That film really planted a seed for me that then determined, I guess, where we are today from 13 to 35,
Oh, hey. Sorry I'm a little pissed off right now, but my best friend Karen is having man trouble.
Miss Smith, Tracy Johnson's on line too.
Tell her I'm in a meeting, but I'll be there in an hour. Tracy, another one of my girlfriends. Man trouble too. Seems like every woman I know is having man trouble.
I was very fortunate to have a millennial icon, Kara Brown, the writer-screenwriter Kara Brown on the show.
I love Kara.
I was so overwhelmed at the thought of interviewing her. I had to tell her before we chatted. I was like, I am scared to talk to you. I mean, and she was like, oh no, but okay, which was perfect. Yeah. And her character was Tracy Lord from Philadelphia Story.
Okay.
And which made complete sense. And it what I was wondering, in that she had, it seems like throughout Kara's entire life, that absolute strength and presence and persona that Katharine Hepburn brings as Tracy Lord, that wasn't something she grew into. That was something that was always innate to Kara.
Yes.
And so with we meet Vivica in this movie, we meet Shantae as your smartest friend, your hottest friend, your most successful friend, your friend with all the good advice. And she's just like, well, these poor girls talking about her friends and their love lives.
Yes.
Have you always had the Shantae confidence, or is that a thing you grew into on your journey to that you at 25 you visualize?
No, I've always been confident, always.
Excellent.
And I think that really informed and dictated a lot of my transition. I think that informed and dictated the ways in which my parents and family interacted with me. Because they knew when I presented this to them, when it was a formal presentation, when I said, look, this is what it is.
All right.
They knew that there was no back and forth with it. No. Okay, this is what it is. And, both of my parents do make jokes about witnessing my evolution. I'd, go off to college, and every break that I would come home, it would be something different. Okay, now the nails are done. And then, I'd be talking like, oh, no, I'd never wear blush and eyeshadow. This is just a little foundation concealer. But every single break I would come home, there would be something new, but it was not something forced. And I think that is what, again, informed and dictated even the ways in which I was respected because I've always been headstrong. You're talking to a girl who at 4 years old, was getting up in front of a congregation of over 200 people and directing the choir, an adult choir. Next to her aunt. I was waiting to hear like
singing, but not directing the
choir. No, I sang too, but I wanted so much to be like my aunt at the time, who was the lead soprano, and she also directed the choir, that I would shimmy away. My mom would be in the choir stand. My dad was supposed to be watching me, and I would shimmy away and crawl under the pews. Literally to this day, when I go to Chicago, if I run into anybody from that church, they call me the little director. That's what they used to call me. Because, my aunt would get irritated because everybody would be looking at this 3-year-old instead of watching her. But I would be imitating her every move and directing this adult choir in front of this large congregation. So I've always been confident. And I think that I don't know if my confidence was taught. I genuinely don't. I think it was affirmed, but I do believe that I came into the world fairly confident when I look over my life. I do believe that I was affirmed by teachers and teachers who changed my life. We all have those teachers, right?
Yes. Then, Mr. Gordon, love you.
mine was Miss Lass in 4th grade. She was Swedish. And so like teachers and like aunts and family, and I had some opposition, but I was a headstrong kid. Kid and a very confident kid. So the Shantae was always there, even though, in fairness, let me be clear. In fairness, Jordan, I have been every character that was her friends. Like, I've cried over men and made mistakes. I've acted a fool, but for the most part, even to this day, my friends are like, they come to me and I'm like, are you coming to me for a listening ear, or are you coming to me because you'd like advice? Because I give unsolicited advice all the time.
Girl, how do you know everything she says is true?
Because nobody knows more about men than my girl Shantae.
She's right. Sorry, ladies.
Shantae, you tell Miss Thing who has the 411 on the fellas.
Well, I don't want to toot my own horn, honey, but beep.
She didn't say yes.
Well, she didn't say no either.
Look, all I know is whenever I have a problem with my man, I call Shantae because she keeps it real.
Ladies, can I get some on keeping it real?
Okay.
Keeping it real.
In listening to We See Each Other, I heard you bring up Two Can Play that game. And there was a part where you mentioned like watching this wasn't necessarily about like seeing like the I'm gonna get my Morris Chestnut kind of situation, but like you kind of honed in on that ensemble of women around her, and you having mentioned like having a network of very powerful women around in your life as well. I wanted to hear about you talking about like reclaiming your joy this year, and then having this foundational character when you're young, where you really link with them, and in a way even then hone in on like the sorority that she assembles around herself. How has the process been for you of like bringing that sort of shield of humanity around you with your women, perhaps your theys, thems, the she, hers, in like building that community around yourself? And is that like, does she exist as a kind of possibility model in that way, Vivica, in this?
Listen, it's been an interesting journey. Growing up, all of my friends were women, of course. And I also was the girl group girl. Like I did not, growing up, I did not flock to individual singers. I loved them. I respected the Whitneys and the Shaka Khans, and I respected them, but I was always a girl group girl. Always. Okay. I was a huge fan of In Vogue when I was little. I was a huge fan of SWV. I just got back from the UK. I visited the steps that the Spice Girls shot the Wannabe video on. Like, I was such a fourth grade me was walking around screaming girl power. Okay. And then, once they kind of like, I love TLC, but then my heart has been with Destiny's Child for years. They were the first girls that I heard like talking like me. They're talking about gumbo. I never heard black girls talk about gumbo, know, in a way in which my family
on Top 40 radio.
Right. And so Destiny's Child has my heart even to this day. And that's with the greatness that Beyonce is. I still prefer to see those. It's something about those three silhouettes that will send me, my soul will leave my body. I love Destiny's Child. I just love Destiny's Child. And so that camaraderie and that sisterhood and that sorority of it has always been there. I've always marveled at these friendships like Beyonce and Kelly and Oprah and Gayle. Like always
Oprah and
really,
Gayle.
yes, like I always wanted, and I have sisters of my own, but we're 5 years apart. And I should mention that my sisters are twins. So they got their own thing going on.
They got their own thing. They very much have their own specific thing, for sure.
Yeah. And so for me, my journey, which has been so interesting because post-transition, a lot of my friends became men, like gay men, straight men. Like, it's been weird. Like, pre-transition, it was a lot of women. Post-transition, it's a lot of men. I don't know what that says about me or society, but I did notice that once I transitioned, I lost girlfriends. There were girls that were like, oh no, and it had nothing to do with like, oh, I think transition is wrong. Yeah. It had everything to do with like, this is a bad bitch. You know, like they wouldn't say that, but it's like, you know, like
you then kind of maybe entered the competitive side of female friendship.
Yes. I experiencing that was very tough for me. And so it's still something that means a lot to me. And that's with respect. I just turned 35 in January, and I've had friendship changes throughout the last like 3 years. And I'm talking about weird friendship changes where there's been no point of contention, but it's like we're no longer in each other's lives, which is something that I still wrestle with, because it's easier when you can pinpoint like, oh, okay, we got into this really bad argument at brunch and never recovered versus like, I look up one day and you unfollowed me. Like, I'm not used to that. Like, especially at this age, use your words, sweetie, you know? But these are things that have happened, I want to say, starting in October and kind of ending in February, where it was very, very tough for me. But I appreciate what I do have, and that sisterhood amongst women, and even, you know, with non-binary people in my life, means the world to me. That shared experience, that opportunity to come together and really show up for one another means the world to me. And I'm not taking away from my gay friends, but
no, of course not.
Also, they're doing things like they do their own stuff that I don't have. Like when they go to a circuit party, that's not a place for me. You know what I'm saying?
You're like, I don't need the invite, and I'm not asking for the invite.
And they have tried. God bless them. They're so sweet. They're like, Shar, you can come. And I'm like, I have no desire. That's not a space for. I know myself well enough to know. But that's not a space for me. And so it's been interesting as far as like finding my footing, especially given how like transness is such a hot button topic right now. We kind of talk about that in the podcast. Like,
absolutely.
2015, 2016, things were different. People were getting fired from their jobs for being transphobes. And then kind of like this ushering of unapologetic ignorance that
the quote trans tipping point that was then followed by the Trump tipping point.
Exactly. And what was ushered in, and kind of like that stench that's still lingering in the air with people just being unapologetically racist or unapologetically misogynist, unapologetically transphobic, and how these people have networks now. They get fired from their jobs, and guess what? Another transphobe will hire them. So it's the public shaming of the Twitter days and stuff. It's kind of like long gone. I think we've become, well, we're desensitized to a lot at this point, where it's just run of the mill. Oh, another quote unquote Karen went off, or there's more black blood in the streets. Oh, a trans woman was murdered. Okay, it's just a regular Tuesday in the States. Well, what's for dinner?
Is part of that your deliberate decision to be like joy, the year of joy?
That is my resistance, because as a news girl, as a journalist, I was losing my mind. And then there's also this expectation with being visible and a black woman and trans. I'm showing up for reproductive rights and trans rights, and I'm on air, you know, screaming into a microphone when Roe v. Wade is overturned, and literally unplugging and not tweeting or engaging with social media when I feel like it. If and only when, because I also found myself, I'll be transparent, Jordan. There were times where when I get on Instagram, I can't check people's stories. The feed is okay, but it's just like, and I'm someone who's so confident in what's for me won't pass me by. That's what I feel like has carried me in LA. I do not compete with my friends.
That is a great point of view to have, like generally, but God, specifically in Los Angeles, where there's constantly, did I miss it? Did I miss it? Did I miss it? Did I miss it? Like, to be able to hold on to that is true. That is fucking life-saving.
It's something that my parents, specifically my mom, instilled in me like back in grade school when I like lost a spelling bee and was devastated. But it's something, seriously, it's something that I feel like has helped keep me together. I've seen people unravel. That was supposed to be my opportunity. No, it wasn't. That was theirs. And even if it was supposed to be yours and they did something shady or shifty to get it, that's then their karma to deal with.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that was theirs. Even if they snaked their way up to it, that had their name on it, because I believe without a shadow of a doubt, what has my name on it, no one can come in between. It will find me when it is supposed to. But I say that to say that, like, just dealing with the visibility and kind of that paradox of where do I fit in, that's really kind of shown up for me, which is so odd, showing up for me in my like I said, I'm 35, and I almost feel like, where do I fit in when it boils down? Because, you know, it's a strange place to be in, but I have full confidence that everything will be okay. But that resistance is part of it. You all will not assign your trauma to me. And when I say you all, I'm not talking about my community. I'm talking about John Q. Public, who groups all Black trans people into one, think that we all have one story, and that's not the case. Or even all Black women, they think all Black women have one story, and that's not the case. And so me choosing joy, me choosing different, me choosing to acknowledge that that is your pain, that is your trauma, and we can exist in that, but it is also not my story. So that's not my burden to carry, and I won't. I will not. That's how I've been navigating most of this year.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll have more with Shar about who she's hoping to see on screen and how she navigates media in a maddening world. Then I'll have one quick thing before I go about the new movie She-Rose. Regrettable title, exciting trailer. We're gonna get into it at the end. Shouts out to friend of the pod, Isabel Furman, with a new movie out. Stick around, everybody. One quick thing at the end.
Oh my gosh, hi, it's me, Dave Holmes, host of the pop culture game show Troubled Waters. On Troubled Waters, we play a whole host of games, like one where I describe a show using a limerick, and our guests have to figure out what it is. Let's do one right now. What show am I talking about? This podcast has game after game, and brilliant guests who come play them. The host is named Dave. It could be your fave, so try it. Life won't be the same.
Big Business, starring Bette Midler and Lily Tomlin.
Close, but no.
Oh, is it Troubled Waters, the pop culture quiz show with all your favourite comedians?
Yes, Troubled Waters is the answer
to this question and all of my life's problems.
Now, legally, we actually can't guarantee that, but you can find it on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
J. Keith, do you know what I love more than the trivia, comedy, and celebrity guests on our podcast, Go Fact Yourself?
No, what, Helen?
Sharing all of those things with an actual audience.
A live audience.
Woohoo!
Well, lucky for you listeners, Go Fact Yourself has brand new episodes featuring live audiences cheering on guests every month. And we still have all of our Zoom episodes with contestants and experts from around the world.
We can truly have it all.
Yay!
You can hear it all twice a month, every month on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah, no excuses. So if you're not listening,
you can go fact yourself.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. This week I'm talking with Shar Jossell, accomplished freelance journalist and co-host of the We See Each Other miniseries here on Maximum Fun. Let's get back to that conversation.
It's about independence. This is a demonstration of her independence to you. What she's really trying to tell you is that at this point in her life, you can't do nothing for her. You can't even buy her damn dinner. She'd rather starve before you come out the pipe.
That's deep, bro. That's some really deep shit right there, man.
As a journalist, as somebody so steeped in entertainment and pop culture, a thing I wanted to ask you about was this movie as a part of an era of a very fruitful time in Black cinema, where it seems like there was allowed to be a Black cinema economy that was not rooted in its difference from whiteness, but was simply Black people living their lives. There's like obviously like the incredible rom-com stretch where you have there with like, you know, The Best Man and this movie and Brown Sugar.
And
yes, and the films of Rick Famuyiwa, the films of F. Gary Gray, like the era of Morris Chestnut and Taye Diggs. And the era of Nia Long and Sanaa Lathan continues uninterrupted.
Yes.
there's something about just like the unshowy joy of even like an agony, you know, in some senses, like with the new queer cinema movement in the 90s, there's almost like this activism strain of cinema that when you watch it, like with Black cinema, it doesn't feel like activism. It just simply feels like Black creators getting to make stories by and about and for themselves, as opposed to now, the idea of seeing like a Black ensemble comedy in the way that they were so proliferate around the late 90s into early 2000s. Now it feels like hey guys, we're planting a flag.
Yeah.
And like we're doing something.
Yeah.
Versus at the time, it seemed like those movies were allowed to exist more unencumbered from the strings of, hey guys, it's visibility time. So it's the wood.
It's message time.
Yeah, it was just the wood.
Yeah.
Like that's all it was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hear from you as a, you know, millennial growing up, the difference maybe between experiencing that stuff in real time and then seeing in retrospect how it fits with what we do now in film and like a Black ensemble story, or how it is in contrast to it.
I think it's in contrast. You know, I mean, much of what you said covered the bases. We did go through a period in time where Black people on screen were just allowed to exist. There was no trauma. There were no specific tropes. And I've honestly been praying, as someone who's intersectional, I've been praying for that moment for trans people to happen, because I find that always shows up. Whenever there's a trans character, there's an ABC, or we're not seeing stories of trans people just, you know, grabbing a cup of coffee with their friend, doing things that I do and doing things that I know that other trans people do. We're stressed about bills. It's not about, and me being stressed about the light bill is not linked to my father throwing me in the trash can when he caught me playing in a wig, you know, so I can't wait till we get to that place. But I think that it is in contrast, and I don't know if that's a function of the conversation where we are today, but everything does feel like a very ABC, preachy teachy, as you mentioned at the top of the show, very 101, 102 versus showing the realities. And that's also what kind of gets under my skin, because, you know, what's the saying? He who controls the media controls the mind. And so if people keep getting fed one specific image of one specific demographic, that then informs how they then will, you know, engage with and interact with those people. And so those stories were pivotal for us at the time, because prior to that, we either had a lot of traumatic stories. I mean, slave movies aren't going anywhere. People like slave movies. So we got a lot of slave narratives, or we got these narratives of like Black men incarceration, Black women baby mamas. And what that window of time did between like late 90s, early 2000s, with this surge of rom-coms and like Black people in their 20s and 30s just living and loving, that shook all of that up. And so I think that where we are right now is it has a slither of that showing up, like Insecure on HBO, Issa Rae's show. That was still just Black people just existing.
I was thinking of like, I was like, wow, watching seeing the strings directly connecting from Two Can Play That Game to Insecure was like, that's so beautiful.
So these works of art still exist, but we are in a very preachy teachy, which again, I don't understand, but this is what people want. That's what I have to realize when I criticize like trans art, for example, that's upheld. It's not it's not an indictment on the filmmaker. It's not an indictment on the people who choose to act or participate in this art. It's an indictment on who's signing the checks, because I know for a fact that there are trans creators and LGBT creators that have come to the table with just having a trans character be a trans character. And the people writing the checks are like, we need a rewrite. We need some trauma. Because that is what, you know, they want to see. And that's what I think also tears people up when they come across different trans people, or they think they've never met a trans person, right?
Yeah, they think.
Right. You don't know that Barbara, who's your coworker, is a trans woman. She's 65 now, but she transitioned at 22. And you don't know that, because I can't even blame you for not knowing that, because her story has never been told, you know? And so, yeah, we're in a very weird place when it comes to media, particularly as it pertains to certain intersections, because it's not just happening with Black people, or not just happening with trans people. It's happening with Asian communities, Latino communities. Like that's just where we are, where we're back in this weird, I shouldn't even say back, because we've never been here before with the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of representation and community. So it's interesting. It's weird.
in terms of just like from a career standpoint, is that something where it's like with there being like with it always having been an onslaught against trans folks and now that onslaught being even more intense and acute and more publicly waged and being like a full fucking platform for a political party? Is there a difficult duty of care in your job where it's like, fuck, where do I balance my honest critique versus my protection of my community? Like, is the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s aspect of it, like, does that bring a weight to you in how you approach writing about things? Or are you like, no, I will speak the truth of what I think about this, and that's I have no conflicted feelings over that.
So here's the thing, I'm gonna speak the truth regardless, but I think that everything can be said. It's just how you go about saying it.
Sure.
And then on top of that, you know, again, all roads lead back to how people navigate their personal politic. So what might work for me might not work for this person. My lived experience might not be a reflection of that. And that's where we get in the weeds with this with every community, because it's like, you got it wrong. That's not how did it. But for that person, maybe it is. You know,
certainly watch this play out all the time among queer people.
Yes.
Like, just like, listen, guys, it's not just happy to be here anymore. Like, we need to critique this on its terms for what it means to us as a community, and not just like what our straight family members will think of it when they see it.
Right. If my life were made into a movie, there would be people that would have even if it wasn't based on me, if there was a character loosely based on my story, there would be people that pipe up and say that is not the Black trans experience. Well, according to who? You know what I'm saying? And so I give grace, but I'm gonna call a thing, especially if I feel, if again, this is my view and my opinion, if I'm reviewing something and I feel it to be utterly ridiculous, or if I feel it to be harmful. There are stories that I have reviewed that have popped up that highlight like scammers and people, and there's nothing wrong with showing the full breadth of like trans experience. Like, I'm not someone who approaches art saying that all trans people in every depiction of art have to be the hero or good, or because that is not the truth. However, how is this piece of art contributing to the conversation? That is what I will say. If this person is being depicted on screen, if the one trans person on the most popular show is viewed as a liar, a deceitful, a scammer, how is this hurting and harming at the same time, or the larger conversation? And that's how I'll approach it, because this is what people are seeing. If there's already limited visibility of trans people and the one trans person on the most popular show, and I'm just throwing this out theoretically, this isn't real, but like, if it's something harmful and not just someone like existing, how does this hurt or harm the conversation? And like Euphoria, I know people have their issues with that show, but the way Jules is depicted, Jules is an anti-hero. People hate Jules because of the way she treats Rue. However, I don't view Jules as problematic, because we got a backstory on Jules. I personally
love her, but
but we saw her backstory and we see what I can relate to Jules with her relationship with Nate, because as a girl who's lived the life, there has been Nates in my life that have shown up in different ways. So that's what draws me in specifically to Jules, you know? And so, and was moving me to tears sometimes watching those episodes, because they're different facets. And that's why I think it's important to make characters multidimensional, because someone will get something. We all get different interpretations from what we see on screen. And so I don't know if I answered your question. I think I did, but I might have taken the long way around.
I often take the long way around to my questions and my answers, so I appreciate the journey to what gets us to where we are.
Yeah. Rule number 2: never let your girlfriends know the whole situation, because all they'll do is give you bad advice, and that'll ruin your confidence. And confidence is key. Rule number 3, and it's an old rule: break up with him before he breaks up with you. Whoever breaks up with the person first wins.
In the point of specifically of like Shantae, did you when you were watching this as a middle schooler, I think, did you relate to this, like, these rules-based way of operating for Shantae?
At the time, like, yes. At the time.
Okay.
Yes, I was a child. And like I mentioned, I am a rigid earth sign. Well, I can be a rigid earth sign. And so it even took a lot for me. It took me up until 33 to embrace the gray areas of life, because that's also how I was raised. I should mention I was raised by 2 earth signs. I don't know if you subscribe to the astrology of it all. So I was raised in a very rural based household. There was black and white. And what I realized that I had to embrace as I got older is the gray areas of life. And even with Shantae, like you mentioned, Shantae's rules, those are not matter of facts. Those are suggestions. Because the pendulum could swing either way. And so it is her confidence, it's Shantae's confidence that makes it a matter of fact. If he does this, girl, you do that. And if you do that, he'll definitely do that. Like it was that, you know.
Definitely.
I related to that. And so that meant a lot to me. Vivica's visibility, the way that in which she portrayed that character and was kind of like this mother figure to her friends and running up against Connie Spaulding, who was Gabrielle Union's character, who everyone loves.
When I was listening to We See Each Other and this got brought up and you were like, the big movie for me, and Tre'vell was like, oh, you were Connie? And you were like, I was Shantae.
Shantae. Connie was trifling. No, Tre'vell tried me. Tre'vell tried me with that.
I was like, wow, what does Tre'vell know that makes her a Connie? Because that's extremely interesting to me.
Connie Spaulding, Vice President of Marketing and a bona fide hoe. Hey, Connie.
Hey, girl, how you been?
Fine. Where you headed?
Up there to see your man. Is he up there?
Oh, he's up there.
Let me go holler at that Negro.
Okay. Bye, sweetie. Bitch.
Congratulations on being a supposed Connie.
Listen, we all have different sides to us. But I'm like, no, I am not the type. Let me go holler at your man. Like, I can be that type. I can be. But I saw myself in Shantae and all of her successes and awards and like dealing with this man. But now, in adulthood, I'm like, anybody who's acting unclear.
Is you as an award-winning journalist, Shantae.
Thank you.
In your own right, yes.
I don't have the convertible and the nice house that she had, and I also realized that's a fairy tale because I think they were in their mid to late 20s in that film.
She's 28. She says she's 28 years old.
Crazy. And I even think about like sitcoms like Girlfriends. Tracee Ellis Ross's character was like 28, 29 and was already partner at a law firm or trying to be like those unrealistic expectations that they fed us as millennials.
Oh my
really
God.
Tore me up in adulthood. It really tore me up. It really tore me up. And so, to evoke Insecure again, like Issa's journey is more so realistic to the millennial journey, like what she was doing in nonprofit and trying to get her life together. And so, yes, all in all, Shantae, I gravitated to her because of just her positioning and the kind of I'm going to be honest, the kind of know-it-all-ness of it all. Because that's a lot of who I was at the time. I'm getting the grades and I know what I'm talking about. And I'm always thirsty. That's why I'm a journalist, a natural curiosity, a thirst for knowledge. And so, that movie really, really shook me. It really shook me. I like I mentioned, I went to the mirror and I was like, I know I don't want to have the goatee and the briefcase and to be running around with Morris Chestnut and Anthony Anderson trying to figure it out. I also know that I don't like women. I'm not attracted to women. So then, because they don't show, it's so binary, they don't even show how someone who might be gay would function in that friend group. And so the movie did what it was supposed to do at the time. It's very entertaining. It's still one of my favorite movies. It was on Netflix about a year or so ago and I rewatched it and realized how ridiculous it was, now that I'm an adult. I'm like, this is still, it has a good entertainment factor, but it's ridiculous. And so, and I even think about films as we were speaking about like this, I guess, Black Renaissance with films of rom-com genre. I think about The Brothers that had Bill Bellamy and Shamar Moore and D.L. Hughley. And I can't remember the other person. It was four of them. Morris Chestnut. He was the fourth one. And Gabrielle Union's in that film as well. I feel
like it's almost hard to remember Morris Chestnut in those because it's like, couldn't be Morris Chestnut again. It's like, nope, it's Morris Chestnut again.
He was in all of them. And so that film highlights like what Black manhood looked like at the time, like that bonding and even the messiness of relationships. So I felt like that was like the answer kind of sort of to Two Can Play That Game, even though it's a totally different film with a totally different premise, to show that quartet of four men. Because remember, in Two Can Play That Game, it wasn't a quartet of four men, it was just two, and it was a quartet of women. And so I'm kind of rambling now, but all of these movies are coming to surface for me that I enjoyed at the time, but also films that helped shape me. Like even, you're hearing additional perspectives. Like I don't hear what men think about women really. And so it's like, these rules apply, like, you know, or some of these dated, like, you know, how do you know if he really loves you? If there's one piece of chicken on the plate and instead of eating it, he offers it to you. Like that was one of the things in The Brothers between Morris and Gabby, and Jennifer Lewis was their mom and stuff. So,
well, okay, I guess then to bring it to the conclusion, I would say, like, talking about the fruitfulness of this era in the 90s around Two Can Play That Game and movies in that vein. And in your year of joy, where do you find consistently, hopefully consistently, if anything, that joy in present day media that is feeding you, that is sustaining your spirit, not sitting upon it heavily, where you feel like you're not having to do rationalizations around it, but like steeped in entertainment culture for all this time, like you're like, you know, but I'm glad that I have this to look to that encourages me for what is possible, for what more I would like to see?
That's a great question. For media, for me, looks totally different now. I used to watch Good Morning America every morning. That was the morning show that I chose for myself in high school. I'm talking about with Diane Sawyer and Charlie Gibson as the lead anchors. Like I used to watch Good Morning America every morning. I stopped watching the news. I was watching The Readout because of Joyanne Reed and her visibility and the history that she made. I stopped watching that. I pretty much stopped watching all news, and I get shocked when I get online and I'm like, oh, this happened, you know? But there are certain talk shows that I will not abandon. I watch The View every single day because that is one of my dream jobs. You know, I practice my walkout. I'm ready for the call. I would like to. So I watch The View because that is, for me, how I find joy in media, because that's something that's a show I grew up on. And I remember being in high school and I used to call myself out. I used to imitate my mother's voice and I would call myself out because my junior year, second semester, my first two classes were PE and like algebra. I'm not going to that. I'm not, especially on those block days. And so I would wake up and I would watch Good Morning America. And then in Chicago, Oprah came on at 9 a.m. instead of 4 p.m. So Oprah was on, and then I'd watch The View, and then I'd go to school. And so when I think back to The View, and there are many iterations of the cast and the drama.
Oh, God, yeah.
I know that feels, even in the topsy-turviness of the world and with them honing in on politics and stuff, it's something about that show that still feels like an embrace to me. And of course, the visibility of Whoopi. I grew up on Whoopi as an actress, and now like she is the moderator, aka, now granted, we don't always agree. Sometimes Whoopi get on my damn nerves. But there's something familial about Whoopi. The Color Purple, Sister Act, Lion King. Like I grew up with this voice, and now she's the moderator in my adult life. And so that's pretty much how it shows up for me. I've been shielding myself a lot. And it's greatly helped with my mental health. I do not feel the pressure to be visible, which is created in the gig economy. I'm a freelancer. You're a journalist. Be visible. Post every interview. Post, which I do. But like, I realized that so much of that was performance for me. So much of like, oh, got to do the reels, or you do an Instagram post 3 times a week. It has to be at 2 p.m. for maximum visibility, and make sure you get the most and I don't have the energy for that. And I think that I just eventually hit a breaking point. And this year for me has been what I love most about it. I've been relaxed. And so it hasn't been a war. I haven't been at war with myself. Like, you should be online right now. You should be reading. Like, I'm still informed. I'll read. I'm still informed. But the peace that I have found has not involved the internet. I'm watching documentaries. I'm a big book reader, as you've heard on the podcast. I prefer physical books because physical books remind me of grade school. They remind me of, I love flipping a page. Like I listen to podcasts, so I'm not really an audiobook girl unless I absolutely have to, but I enjoy a physical book with a highlighter and a bookmark and smelling the pages. And I know I'm aging myself by saying this, but it's something like,
younger than me, keep going.
Get your e-reader away from me. I prefer changing, like flipping the pages. And so for me, these are just things that I'm able to pour into myself, and it's been helpful. So I've still been informed. I still know what's going on, and I'll get quick hits. Like The View gives me quick hits, and then I can then go do my own research and dig a little deeper. But like I said, you know, Elon's Twitter is not a Twitter for me. I'm rarely on there. you realize that everyone's looking for confirmation bias. So if you believe that all trans women are these terrible people lurking in bathrooms, you will filter out everything until that one story pops up and you're going to run with it. And so for me, it just, after a while, it felt like yelling into the void. And I don't have the energy for that because people are going to believe what they want to believe. That's why Fox News still has a bustling audience. And just with like I said, journalist to journalist, there's certain ethics and certain things that we were taught that just seem totally tossed out of the window right now. And where's a soft space to land? So yeah, it's as a journalist and as also as someone who is Black and a woman and who is trans, functioning in the United States, that's how I'm finding my joy, which is reciprocal friendships, making sure I pour into people who pour into me, and keeping my head on straight, Jordan. Like it's a lot. As you know, it's a lot out here going on right now.
It's a lot for me, and it's not nearly as much for me as it is for you. So Jesus fucking Christ, congratulations on being here at all.
Thank you.
I mean, so like I have to relinquish you to time, but I would like to send it off on just thanking you for being here at all and thanking you for being on this show and being so generous with your time with me. I was really looking forward to seeing wherever this conversation would go because I always get so excited to talk to people in media because it's like, you think about this stuff like I think about this stuff. So I really appreciate the chance to get to do the comparative literature analysis of Black ensemble rom-coms in the millennial era with now. That's very satisfying.
Well, thank you again so much for having me. This has been fun. It has filled my cup up on this morning. It's been great. And for those of you who have not yet witnessed the greatness of Two Can Play That Game, I implore you to check it out. Let me know. Find me on socials. Let me know what you think about Shantae Smith and what she was out there doing.
I can't believe that movie at the very end made me root for a man. I was like, I'm with Pete.
I know. Don't give it away, Jordan. Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
That can't tell you anything, guys, because if you've listened to this show at all, you would know that there's no explaining why Jordan would be rooting for the man in anything. That should tempt you to be like, wow, I should fucking watch this movie. What is Vivica doing in this film?
Great.
Thank you for your time, Shar. Shar Jossell, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks once again to Shar Jossell. If you haven't seen Two Can Play That Game, it's out there on streaming. It's on Prime, so check it out. It's so worth your time. God, when you want to miss the 90s and those early 2000s, that sweet spot of cinema, Two Can Play That Game. The final episode of We See Each Other, the podcast, just came out this week, so you can listen to that entire thing and enjoy even more of Shar's wisdom alongside additional friend of the show, Tre'vell Anderson. So please, keep it in-house. Support us all. Just get all that dialogue in the mix, get all that discourse in your head, and be better for it. And now, my one quick thing before I go. I haven't seen this yet, guys. Full disclosure, I have not seen it yet, but the movie Sheroes, I remember seeing some promotion for this a number of months ago. And because it had Isabel Fuhrman in it and women fighting people, I banked it away in my mind. I didn't know when it was coming out, but turns out it is out right now. So I have not seen this movie yet. However, as I said just now, it stars Isabel Fuhrman and Sasha Luce and Wallace Day. And this is about a group of four friends, four besties. I guess they're going on a vacation to Thailand. One of them gets kidnapped because they end up accidentally stealing a bag of drugs. So their friend gets kidnapped and they obviously have to go rescue her so that she doesn't get killed. And it involves them becoming bad bitches, carrying big guns, and having to take on a bunch of henchmen? The wonderful director of the Skylines films, Liam O'Donnell, a friend, a fantastic person, he DM'd me over the weekend, which is how I became aware that this movie's actually out. And he sent me the trailer and he was like, did you make this? And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, if I could pick a career track for the rest of my life, it would be making a movie that looks like the trailer for Sheroes over and over again in perpetuity. Yes, that is exactly what I want. I want movies about women carrying big guns, saving their friends, and being besties and protecting the sanctity of friendship. That's what I want. That's what my whole life to be. So obviously I'm going to watch this. I'm hopeful, at the very least. Go Isabel Furman. We stan her on this pod. We support her on this pod. And hey, it's nice to update you guys every once in a while about what our previous guests are up to. So get out there and check out some Isabel. And Sasha Luce, the star of Anna, is also in this, and she deserves better than that movie. An utterly boring effort by Luc Besson. So let's hope she gets to have more fun in this. She Rose. A title that, for better or worse, I would imagine will wheedle into your mind and stay there because it's a bit cringe. But you know what? Doesn't matter. We're going to go in for it. Women carrying guns, women fighting bad men in the name of friendship. We love to see it. And that, what a perfect note to go out on for a Jordan Crucciolo experience. That is our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingScenePod or send us an email at feelingscene@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jor Crew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.